our 7th or 8th presentation of whatever we call this night, Joe Bob Briggs Presents Night. And this is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I see we got... We have got warriors out the wazoo here. How many people have seen the movie? Yeah. How many people have not seen the movie? How many people were in the movie? Actually, 2 people raised their hands. This story is based on events that happened in the year 401 BC, the year they started building the New York City subway system. And I'll get to the 401 BC part in a minute, but I want to say that this is the only movie ever made where all transportation in the movie is by subway, and where they actually put insert shots into the narrative to show you just what part of the subway they're on. But unfortunately, the director was Walter Hill, who is from California, and so all of it is wrong. Now, if you really want, I'm going to get down to the nitty-gritty of this movie because we have, I normally don't go into this much detail, but this movie really warrants it. If you want to get down to the 1000th degree of detail, the Warriors website that's run by Gareth Jones, who by the way is a Brit, has every single thing you never wanted to know about the Warriors on it. So you can always go there. But there are actually 4 dates to remember when you talk about the Warriors story. 401 BC, 1965, 1970, and 1978 when they actually filmed the movie. Now, in 1965, Saul Urich wrote this novel called The Warriors, and Saul Urich was a communist, and he was a youth social worker in Brooklyn, and more to the point, he was a student of Greek history. Now, he was also something of an intellectual, and he was the worst kind of intellectual, which means he never shut up. And so he wrote many times and talked many times about why he wrote the story this way and how it developed and anything. I'm just going to go back to the way he originally said that he did it, because I think that's the closest to what happened. The whole novel is based on a book called Anabasis, and we have how many classical Greek majors do we have in the audience? Oh no, you're kidding me! You've got to be kidding me! We actually have 2 classical Greek majors. Okay, Anabasis was written by the Greek writer Xenophon. Now you guys can check my facts if I get any of this wrong, but if you take classical Greek, you spend the first year conjugating verbs and declining nouns and learning how to write those funny little characters and everything. And in the second year, you read an actual book. And the book that you read is the Anabasis. Is this correct, guys? The Anabasis by Xenophon. And why do you read this book? Because Xenophon wasn't really a writer. He was a soldier. And so the great thing about soldiers who write books is that they use short declarative sentences. And so it's great for students. They're easy to read. That's why if you take classical Latin, you read Julius Caesar. Again, not a writer, a soldier. And so it's easy to read. Caesar is boring as fuck, by the way. Xenophon is the most exciting military writer to ever come along. So Greek students get a better deal than Latin students. But he told one of the most exciting military stories ever written in this book. You can even read it in translation. It still reads well today. I'm going to tell it like as briefly as I can, really. A guy named Cyrus the Younger in Persia wanted to take the throne away from his brother, the evil king, Artaxerxes. And in order to take the throne away from him, he wanted to hire the best badass military soldiers in the world, which of course were the Greeks. And so he hired 10,000 mercenaries from Greece to come all the way down to southern Persia and help him fight Artaxerxes and take the power away from him. So, these Greeks were led by a guy named Clearchus. They marched all the way down to Mesopotamia, and in fact, I'll tell you that in a minute. They joined Cyrus's army, and they met Artaxerxes at the Battle of Cunaxa. Cunaxa is about 57 miles north of Babylon, what was called Babylon at the time, today, Baghdad. So the same place the Iraq War happened. They won the battle, but unfortunately Cyrus was killed by a very accurate javelin throw. And so the war's over. They didn't get paid. How the fuck do we get home? That's what the story is. So they say, well, here's another guy, here's another Persian guy, let's make this guy king. So they go, they say, Tissaphernes, we want you to be king so we can stay here and get paid, and you can take over the throne from Artaxerxes because we won the fucking battle. You know, and he says, oh, I don't really want to do that. He says, but I also don't want you down here. I tell you what, come to the castle and we'll talk about it. He invites them to a feast. As soon as they get there, he cuts off the heads of all the senior officers of the Greek contingent. Time to elect new leaders and make a plan. So they're trapped in the middle of nowhere near Cunaxa in what is now Iraq. Can I show that map? I'll show them where this happens. I am going to make a point with all this, okay? Stay with me just a little bit. Okay. Unfortunately, now see, the Greek guys started over here. But, you know, they took their boats from Greece down to here. This is no picnic, just getting down to where the battle was. You know, they did all this. That's 1,200 miles. They walked just to get down to Cunaxa to have this battle. Then Cyrus gets killed. The leader of the Greeks get killed. Now they've got to make their way back 1,200 miles to Greece. They have no money. They have no food. They have nothing. And every 5 to 7 days of that march, there's a new army to fight. You either have to fight with the army or you have to, you know, make a deal. Can we cross your territory? And so they go all the way up through what is called Armenia and Corjuine. Now, Corjuine is where the Kurds are today. It's called Kurdistan. To give you an idea of what these people were like, they worshipped the thunderbolt god Tishub, who was conceived when the god Kumarbi bit off and swallowed his father's genitals. Okay, so these were not sophisticated guys. So every mountain pass you go through, they're waiting to, you know, shove boulders down on you and so the point of all this is that they head up through all these areas, and they finally get to the Black Sea, and they exult because, you know, the sea, we can build a boat, and we can go across, you know, and this part was fairly easy up here. But this part was hell. Okay, so Saul Urich comes along in 1965, and Saul Urich was what they called a social investigator for the city of New York. I don't know what that was, but he worked with what were called juvenile delinquents at the time in gangs. And he created a gang for his novel called the Coney Island Dominators. And it was a almost all a black gang, partly Hispanic, but it was black and Hispanic. At a time when, and by the way, Coney Island in 1965 looked even worse than it does today. So it was a tough gang. So they get, in the book, they get summoned to a meeting of the gangs in Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx, about as far away from Coney Island as you can get, right? The guys are from the Bronx. Okay. And the gangs are going to all get together, and their idea is to outnumber the cops. And the gang leader in the book is Ismael Rivera. Unfortunately, he gets killed. Same thing, no weapons, no money, no way to get home, hostile territory. We got to fight our way all the way back to Coney Island. And so same story, just taken from Mesopotamia and put into the Bronx. All right. In 1978, by the way, well, I'll do that in a minute. 1978, Walter Hill gets the story. Walter Hill is the director. He eliminates several things in the book. He eliminates the guy that the Coney Island Dominators kill just for fun. He takes that scene out. he takes out the pissing contest to see who can piss the farthest, and he takes out the gang rape. He also eliminates the part where the hero of the story finally gets home to Coney Island. He tries to pick a fight. He can't get anybody to fight with him. He goes home to his crummy apartment. He watches his mom having sex with some random guy. And then he crawls out onto his fire escape and goes to sleep with his thumb in his mouth to indicate what a child he is and how he'll always be a child. So, a little bit different story when Walter Hill got hold of it. And Walter Hill, I don't know any easy way to say this, but Walter Hill doesn't really like women. He does male stories. All of his stories are male stories, and the women are always kind of conniving, no good, you know, I won't use any other words. But, so you kind of know that when the women show up in a Walter Hill story, nothing good is going to happen. But Walter Hill didn't know that much about New York. He was from Long Beach, California. He'd been a cartoonist and a journalist and a construction worker and an oil man, and he got into the movie business. He was the second assistant director on Bullitt. He was the second assistant director on the Thomas Crown Affair, and then he was the second assistant director on Take the Money and Run. Now, second assistant director is basically the lowest job you can have on a movie. You run errands, you walk around with a walkie-talkie, you tell the gaffers where they can go to get fresh coffee, you know. But he became a writer after that, and he wrote The Getaway. And that was his big breakthrough as the writer of The Getaway. And then he directed his first movie, Hard Times. You guys know that movie, 1975. And The Driver in 1978. And then this is his third film. Of course, his breakout movie would come a couple of years later when he made 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. And by the way, Luther in this movie is also Luther in 48 Hours. Same actor, same name. So that worked for him.
48 hours too.
Saul Urich asked to come to the set while they were filming The Warriors, and Walter Hill freaked out, you know, because he came to the set and they said, Saul, we made a few changes, and Saul was okay with it. But he actually made some good changes, like the gang leader in Van Cortlandt Park is Cyrus. He names him Cyrus, after Cyrus the Younger, instead of Ismael Rivera. What did that mean? The leader of the Warriors is Cleon, like Clearchus of the Greeks. The muscle in the gang is Ajax, you know, played by James Remar in his screen debut. And then he changed the Coney Island Dominators, which it was never that great a name, to the Warriors, you know. And he did, you know, I don't know how you feel about the leather vest thing, you know, because they not only had the leather vest, but some of them had the Indian breastplates. You know, they added the Indian breastplates under the leather vest. So, and then he changed some other things, like in the movie, they meet at Times Square. They don't meet at Union Square. And they meet at a big arcade in Times Square. If you'll notice in the Union Square scenes, there's random arcade machines in the background for no reason, you know, just in the subway station. Because I don't know, I guess it was a hangover from the book. I think the strangest thing about that Union Square scene is that a public restroom was actually open. The movie is known, of course, for the gang costumes. There's a gang in purple vests and fedoras. There's a gang of mimes. There's a gang that look like kind of a Genghis Khan thing. I guess it's a Chinatown gang. There's the Electric Eliminators. There's black muscle shirts with white trim. I forget which gang that was. You guys know? Black muscle shirts. Okay. There's that gang in Hugh Hefner silk lounging pajamas. There's a Hawaiian shirt gang with Panama hats on. You know, and of course everybody's favorite, the baseball Furies. We have some Furies here tonight. The Yankees uniforms with the pancake makeup. There's a roller skating gang, and of course the Lizzies. You know. And the main gang of all the gangs is the Riffs. In one scene, they have those orange kung fu tops, you know, but in the later scenes, they don't have that. So I guess that's just their training gear or something. And it's actually the Gramercy riffs. So it's like a gang in Gramercy Park. You know, that's scary. Turnbull ACs. I've never known what the name Turnbull ACs means, but it's the skinheads on a bus. And
they blew it.
And they blew it. Yeah.
Blew it.
There was, and by the way, people always make fun of the movie for the baseball furies, but the reason I said 1970 is in 1970, gang members were arrested in a gang called Second Base that wore Yankees baseball jackets. So there actually was a baseball furies gang in New York City. Now, you're going to notice a lot of things that are wrong about the movie. It looks like they're going to Pelham Bay Park. It was actually Van Cortlandt Park. It should have started at the 250th. I'm assuming you guys know the New York subways. It should have started at the 205th Street station in the Bronx, but instead they start the story at the Pelham Bay station. One thing I wondered is, why didn't the gang just carry a damn subway map? They're free. You don't even have to steal them. Yeah, they even have a scene where the guy's looking at the subway map on the train, like trying to figure it out, like it's just too much. The meeting with Cyrus is at the terminus of the 5 train, and then, by the way, and when Cyrus makes a speech at the beginning, his speech, it starts out with, "Can you count? Can you count?" And then the rest of the speech, if you try to follow the arithmetic that he's doing in the rest of the speech, he can't count. This is an actual 1970s era subway map. This is the first train you see in the story, and this is going to make sense even for you people who haven't seen the movie yet. Is a D train pulling into Stillwell Avenue Station, but when they leave, they take a B train. So we have to assume. Oh, sorry. We have to assume that they're starting down here, and they're taking. This was in the era when you had to know whether you were on the IRT, the BMT, or the IND. So they're taking this train right here. The B train, and they're going up here and they're changing either here or here so that they can end up here in the movie, but in the book here. So either in Pelham Bay Park or Cortlandt Park. And then when they come back, you would think they would just go, because they end up on the 5 train, you can tell from the early part of the movie, you would think they would just come down the east side and get back to Coney Island. No, there's a fire on the tracks. Besides, if they stopped at the 96th Street station on the east side instead of where they end up, which is the 96th Street station on the west side, what gang is going to be at 96th Street on the east side? You know, vicious bond traders or something? You know, it's not going to make a good story. So they end up over here with the west side gangs, and much of all the middle part of the story takes place over here in Riverside Park, and they get separated. There's 96th Street people here. There's people down here in Union Square. There's people in between. When they're in the tunnel, escaping through the tunnel, they're up here in this area and in Riverside Park. Okay. That's when I did this on TV years ago. I actually got letters from people saying, and it's true, when they run out of the 96th Street station, it's 72nd Street, you know. And so, you know, Walter Hill wasn't really good about keeping things as precise as they had been in the book. Michael Beck, the star of this movie, really interesting guy. Some of you may have seen his other movies, but probably not. He was in Alcatraz. Have you ever seen the movie Alcatraz? Michael Beck was the star in that. He was the dimwit redneck in Megaforce, if any of you saw Megaforce. The Warriors made him famous, and then he made Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John. He wasn't so famous anymore. But Michael Beck was from from the eastern delta of Arkansas, little towns in the Mississippi River Delta in Arkansas. He went to Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi, which is, I doubt if anybody here has ever been to Millsaps College, but I have. And it's sort of the fancy college, the fancy small liberal arts college that you go to if you live in Mississippi. And he was the quarterback for Millsaps College, which would kind of be, I would compare that to being the quarterback for the College of New Rochelle, you know, to give a local comparison. He was later on the series Houston Knights, and he's still around, he's still acting. These gangs, they made a decision at an early point. They hired Broadway dancers to be the guys in these gangs. These are the best looking gangs in the history of gangs. I mean, just look at those faces, you know. And they're like the West Side Story gangs, you know. I'm gonna cut you, but first let's dance. So, and they comic booked the whole thing, and in fact, they originally had little connecting things that were comic book wipes to show that it was a comedy story. They took those out, which I'm glad they did take them out. It was released on February 9th, 1979, and that weekend, a teenager was stabbed to death in a theater that was showing the movie in Oxnard, California. Later the same day, another kid was shot in the head at the drive-in in Palm Springs, California that was showing the movie. The following week, a Boston gang went to see the movie as a group and saw another gang that they had trouble with, and they stabbed to death a 16-year-old on the subway on the way home. Well, this was not exactly the kind of publicity that Paramount was looking for when they released the movie. So they pulled all the advertising because supposedly the movie was making the gangs go crazy. So who knew? The real gangs were watching this and saying, yeah, that's us. That's really us. That's the way we are. And then they were getting so charged up by the movie that they were like killing each other as soon as the movie was over. But most of it happened in California, not in New York. The poster that was alleged to have caused all the problem is the poster that we were showing as you guys came in, and it said, "These are the armies of the night. They are 100,000 strong." If you listen to Cyrus at the beginning, they're actually only 60,000 strong, but they made it 100,000 for the poster. They outnumber the cops 5-1. They could run New York City. Now, oddly enough, this upset everybody in the rest of the country, and it was a big scandal and everything, but it didn't upset New Yorkers. What were New Yorkers upset about? Turnstile jumping. Too much turnstile jumping in the movie. You're encouraging young people to jump the turnstile. And apparently some guys jumped turnstiles and they harassed some people at 8th Avenue and 42nd Street. And, you know, if you're at 8th Avenue and 42nd Street and you're concerned about turnstile jumping, you know, you're looking in the wrong direction. So, just 3 or 4 more facts you need to know that will enhance your enjoyment of the Warriors. The undercover cop who arrests Ajax in Riverside Park, that's Mercedes Rule, a Broadway stage actress. This was her first movie, her screen debut. At the time, she was starring in Lost in Yonkers on Broadway. I wanted to mention this too. And this works for me. A lot of people say it's stupid, but you notice there are no other people in the city. It's just the gang members. There's nobody on the trains. There's nobody in the squares. There's nobody walking around. It's just the gang members. To me, that worked, these ghost trains and everything. But that was a decision that Walter Hill made. In fact, there were lots of people in the book version. In fact, there's a reference to Yonkers. I should mention this since we're in Yonkers. The gang gets on a train in the Bronx, and they think they're on a train with zombies. And the reason, because they don't know, the people don't speak to them. People just like stare down at objects in their hands. And they finally figure out that it's people returning from Yonkers Raceway, studying the racing form for the following day. The scene that supposedly caused all the gang violence is that restroom fight in Union Square. And, oh, I want to mention Deborah Van Valkenburg, who plays the really the only girl in the movie. I mean, there's a few, you know, extras, but she's from Schenectady, and she went to Pratt, and she was a folk singer, and with a group called Watermelon. You know, it was the '70s, and she had made her Broadway debut in the movie Hair, in the play Hair on Broadway, and this was her first movie role. The only thing she really did later, she did a lot of regional theater, she did some B-movies, but the only thing she really did later is she was on the sitcom Too Close for Comfort for 5 years.
Jim J. Bullock.
James Remar as Ajax, he had a great career after this. He was from the neighborhood. They found him at the Neighborhood Playhouse, the acting school in New York. He had made his Broadway debut as Richard Gere's lover in the play Bent. He was later best known for Sex and the City as the philandering boyfriend of Ken Cattrall. And he worked for Walter Hill again in 48 Hours. Always a tough guy character actor. And one other guy, of course, we have to talk about, David Patrick Kelly, everybody's favorite. This was his film debut, Luther, in the movie, the head of the Rogues gang. He also worked in 48 Hours. He was in Commando. Walter Hill used him a lot. He was in Wild at Heart. He always played a psycho. Never got away from that psycho game. Did a lot of off-Broadway theater here, and he's from Detroit. All right, I'm going to give the, anybody, any questions before we go, okay, one question. Yes.
Can you dig it?
I love this stuff. Okay, I'm going to give you the drive-in totals, and then we're going to get right to it. As usual, I'll be in the lobby afterwards. Be sure to get, if you haven't been coming to these presentations with us, write down your email and hand it to me. We'll let you know when the next one is, and that's it. Here's the drive-in total.